All right, warning. Michael's cup may give you epilepsy. Show him your cup, Mike. Well, I can see right through your face.
There it is. Stroke and epilepsy warning. Mike chose the wrong color cup.
I like
to the podcast.
Hey, do you know every single one of Chesterton's books?
I wish.
Heretics, orthodoxy, the thing, the appetite of tyranny, man alive, the flying in, what's wrong with the world? I am the everlasting man, the ball and the cross, the man who was Thursday, St. Augustine, the ox, the Napoleon.
Remember that Animaniacs song about all the capitals?
That's right.
These are the books that Chesterton wrote. He wrote enough essays to sink a boat, and a whole bunch of poems we've never read. We just read the everlasting man again. Tremendous trifles, all his grist. The uses of diversity on the list. The defendant, all things considered, as I was saying, you get the gist. The innocence of Father Brown, the wisdom, the secret not as renowned, the scandal, the Donington affair, the man who knew too much is also there. These are the books that Chesterton wrote. He wrote enough essays to sink a boat, and a whole bunch of poems we've never read. We just read the everlasting man again.
You're breaking it down.
The lunatics, tales of the long bow. Did I mention heretics? The club of queer trades, magic, a play. The paradoxes of Mr. Ponderay. A short history of England, sure. The Victorian age in literature. Charles Dickens, Robert Browning, biographies. George Bernard Shaw and Assisi. These are the books that Chesterton wrote. He wrote enough essays to sink a boat, and a whole bunch of poems we've never read. We just read the everlasting man again.
I love this one. It's like too deep for my. This is a particular favorite. I like the idea of leaning into how much he wrote. I was thinking about that today. Ran into somebody over the. We've been on break as in real life anyway. I know we've had a number of episodes come out, but we met a guy that has the entire Chesterton collection from Ignatius Press.
Wow.
39 volumes, takes up like a bookcase basically, and or a small bookcase, but
wow.
It's impressive.
Well, we've been gone along so long that you forgot that was the part where Chesterton's supposed to be talking, not you. So here we go.
You're listening to another episode of Chesterton's Gateway with Ethan Nicolle and Michael Grumbine, and me, A.I. Chesterton. It's too bad I didn't live to be 120. I could have finished my epic about cheese and my sequel to Orthodoxy, Orthodoxy 2, Morthodoxy.
All things considered, as I was saying, you
there we
go.
There's a joke. Thanks, GK.
The wisdom, the secret, not as renowned. The scandal, the Donington affair.
We're back.
The man who knew too much is also there.
Michael didn't hear my great joke in there, but here we go. What do we read this week, GK?
What is Right with the World from TP's Weekly, published in 1910.
All right, so now I don't know a lot about where this essay came from. I think that I found it in the great essay, kind of the best of essays collection that Dale Alquist and a bunch of guys put together called In Defense of Sanity, which I consider the best Chesterton essay collection, which I stole a lot from for my essay collection that I put out, which is what we're covering now, which is Chesterton's Gateway, the name of the podcast. It's also the name of the book that we are currently getting through and we are almost done with. Because, by the way, I'm Ethan Nicolle, that's Michael Grumbine.
Hi.
We are skipping all the Orthodoxy chapters because they're super long, and we're going to do Orthodoxy next. So that's the big plan, is next we're going through Orthodoxy. So if you're wondering what the heck I've been going through Chesterton's Gateway, well, we're skipping the Orthodoxy chapters. And we also took the cheese chapter and moving it to the finale, because a lot of the last chapters of this book are big and long ones. So to kind of break it up, because Orthodoxy is going to have a lot of big and long chapters too, that are going to be multiple episodes. We're doing one special with cheese with Mike Nelson from History Science Studio 3000. Cool special guest, so that's coming up. But this will be broken into 2 episodes, and this is What's Right with the World. Do you have any context to add to this before we jump in?
It is these essays were written off of a comment that he made in the preface of What is Wrong with the World. So he had published, as we'll find out in the first few paragraphs, he had published What is Wrong with the World, or What's Wrong with the World.
A book,
a book. And then he wrote this because he felt that he should answer the question, what's right with the world? Even though in the book, What's Wrong with the World, he does make some commentary on it. So this is an essay specifically devoted, lest Chesterton be thought an unwavering pessimist. He wanted to point out what's right with the world. Of course, in fine Chesterton style, he also tells us what's wrong with the world in his essay. So, this is Chesterton.
Right. So, and the weird thing is he starts off talking about the title. Is he talking about the title of this essay or about the book, What's Wrong with the World? That's where it gets confusing, where this isn't, I don't think this was in What's Wrong with the World, but it feels like he's talking about.
He is. He's talking about what's wrong with the world. And he's starting out by pointing out that, there's this trope that publishers are just soulless slave drivers, but he wanted to point out a time in which they did a good thing for him, even though it was wildly apocalyptic, I think, as he calls it, or something like an apocalyptic title. And and how their enthusiasm is actually what sparked both that as a book and then this essay. So he's a little obtuse about it. He's sort of, you feel like you're in Chesterton's mind, just sort of stream of consciousness about publishers and stuff.
Gotcha. Well, let's start it off with the shortest paragraph yet in our history of Chesterton.
The above excellent title is not of my own invention. It was suggested to me by the editor of this paper, TP's Weekly, and I consented to fill up the bill, partly because of the pleasure I have always had from the paper itself, and partly because it gives me an opportunity of telling an egotistical story, a story which may enlighten the public about the general origin of such titles.
So there we go. It's a very short Chesterton paragraph.
I was in a hurry that day.
Nice.
We just jump to the next one, probably.
Go
Just
for
keep
it.
going? Okay.
I have always heard of the brutality of publishers and how they crush and obscure the author, but my complaint has always been that they push him forward far too much. I will not say that so far from making too little of the author, they make too much of him. That this phrase is capable of a dark financial interpretation which I do not intend. But I do say that the prominent personalities of the literary world are very largely the creations of their publishers, insofar as they are not solely the creations of their wives. Here is a small incident out of my own existence. I designed to write a sort of essay, divided into sections, on one particular point of political error. This fallacy, though small and scholastic at first sight, seemed to me to be the real mistake in most modern sociological works. It was, briefly, the idea that things that have been tried have been found wanting. It was my purpose to point out that in the entanglements of practice this is untrue, that an old expedient may be the best thing for a new situation, that its principle may be useful, though its practice was abandoned, and so on.
All right, so I added a break there because this is a more trademark long paragraph.
Right.
Is he saying real communism has never been tried right there?
So, yeah, in a way. So he's saying that there's a fallacy. He was going to write, this was the book, what he's talking about is the book, What is Wrong with the World, not this track.
Right.
And he's saying, I was going to write a series of a few essays on a particular topic. And the fallacy is, this was a favorite phrase of the British, such and such, whatever you're talking about, has been tried and found wanting.
Been there, tried that, yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly, and it failed. That's the implication is, look, these old things have been found wanting, so we're going to do the new things now. We're going to break stuff in order to. And his point that he wanted to write on was that no, it's not been tried and found wanting. I have a famous excerpt from that book on what are they called? Drink holders, that says it's from Christianity. It says Christianity has not been tried and found wanting. It's been tried and found difficult and abandoned. Mm-hmm. And so there's a reality that he was trying to address, which was, it's easy to dismiss the good things of the past. It might turn out that if you have a problem today, the answer or the solution will be found in the past, not in you breaking stuff and making up something new that's never been before. So classic Chesterton, right? He's just, so let's hearken to the wisdom of the past and our ancestors instead of just breaking stuff for the sake of progress.
Right, because wanting doesn't mean that it's not working. It means that, what are you wanting? And if you're wanting things to be easier, then yeah, you avoid the hard thing. But there may be solutions from the past that are the only choice that can get us forward. But it's the hard solution.
Yep. It's difficult. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it might be your solution that you're really looking for.
Mm-hmm. All right, continuing on with this paragraph.
Therefore, I claimed we should look for the best method, the ideal, whether it is in the future or the past. I imagined this book as a drab-coloured, decorous little philosophical treatise with no chapters, but the page occasionally broken by section headings at the side. I proposed to call my analysis of a radical error what is wrong, meaning where the mistake is in our logical calculation, but I had highly capable and sympathetic publishers, whose only weakness was that they thought my unhappy monologue more important than I did. By some confusion of ecstasy, which entirely through my own fault I failed to check, the title was changed into The Apocalyptic Trumpet Blast, What's Wrong with the World. It was divided up into 3 short, fierce chapters like proclamations in a French riot. Outside there was an enormous portrait of myself looking like a depressed hairdresser, and the whole publication had somehow got the violence and instancy of a bombshell. Let it be understood that I do not blame the publishers in the least for this. I could have stopped it if I had minded my own affairs, and came out of their beautiful and ardent souls. I merely mention it as an instance of the error about publishers. They are always represented as cold and scornful merchants, seeking to keep your writers in the background. Alas, as Wordsworth so finely says, alas, the enthusiasm of publishers has oftener left me mourning.
That's a good inflection there, and alas.
Yeah. That AI Chesterton really leaned into it.
Mm-hmm. Is that Wordsworth quote an inside joke of some kind?
It's a little bit. It's an inside joke of the fact that Wordsworth used alas all over the place in his.
Okay.
So I pulled up a couple quotes of it just as preparation. Things like, alas, how little can a moment show of an eye where feeling plays in 10,000 dewy rays, a face over 1,000 shadows go. He's like, and then everything's alas, and worldly grandeur I despise, and fortune with her gifts and lies, alas. And he has a poem titled "Alas." Wordsworth was a flowery and emotional fellow, and so it's a joke about how alas is this funny word, right? It doesn't have like a direct.
So it's just alas, as Wordsworth says, alas, but it's not the rest. Because I thought he meant, as Wordsworth says, enthusiasm of publishers has oftener left me mourning. He's just saying alas is what Wordsworth says. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. He's just, the word alas is just this. It's like overly dramatic, like fainting dramatic way of putting it. Alas, the enthusiasm of publishers has oftener left me mourning. So their enthusiasm has proven a problem for me. It's not that they were cold. They were too cold. Rather, they were too warm. That provided the issue. Although he does take.
Like he wasn't even paying attention to they probably sent him we changed, made a few changes, and he's like, I'm sure it's fine. And then he sees the book on the shelf.
What's wrong?
What's wrong? It was called "What's Wrong" to "What's Wrong with the World," which
is a fairly apocalyptic title.
And bold for you to be like, I know what's wrong with the world.
Exactly.
That's great. That's totally something a publisher would do. I love that. Okay, is there anything else in there? There was a line in that sentence where it says, I could have stopped it if I had minded my own affairs and came out of their beautiful and ardent souls. It feels like there's a typo or something. Does that make sense to you?
No, it doesn't. I think there might be a typo there.
And something, and came out of their beautiful. Yeah,
it's like a line is missing, and and made changes to what came out of their beautiful ardent souls.
Yeah, maybe it's something like that.
And there's a phrase missing there, but I don't know. Yeah, it's grammatically speaking, it's a little off, which is not Chesterton style. So
right, yeah, it feels like something missing.
So it's probably an error in type.
All right, we'll keep it going.
Upon the whole, I am rather inclined to approve of this method of the publisher or editor making up the title while the author makes up the remarks about it. Any man with a large mind ought to be able to write about anything. Any really free man ought to be able to write to order. Some of the greatest books in the world, Pickwick for instance, were written to fulfill a scheme partly sketched out by a publisher. But I only brought together these two cases of title that came to me from outside because they do illustrate the necessity of some restatement in such a case. For these two titles are, when it comes to the fulfillment, at once too complex and too simple. I would never have dreamed of announcing, like some discovery of my own, what is wrong with the world. What is wrong with the world is the devil, and what is right with it is God. The human race will travel for a few more million years in all sorts of muddle and reform, and when it perishes of the last cold or heat, it will still be within the limits of that very simple definition. But in an age that has confused itself with such phrases as optimist and pessimist, it is necessary to distinguish along more delicate lines. One of the strangest things about the use of the word optimist is that it is now so constantly used about the future. The house of man is criticized not as a house, but as a kind of caravan, not by what it is, but by where it is going. None are more vitally and recklessly otherworldly than those modern progressives who do not believe in another world.
Do not believe in another world.
Yeah, that's a more complex idea. That's maybe we tackle at the end. I really like the first part of that paragraph where he says, it's something that's close to my heart anyway. He says, any man with a large mind ought to be able to write about anything. Any really free man, and when he says really free, he's hearkening to the idea of liberal, like having a liberal education, because not leftist as we now think of the word liberal, but liberal as in from the word free, an education that is proper to a free man. Any really free man ought to be able to write to order. Some of the greatest books in the world, Pickwick, for instance, were written to fill a scheme partially sketched out by a publisher. And Pickwick, I can't remember if you had this in your book because I didn't look.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
But Pickwick is, of course, referring to the Pickwick Papers, which was the first serial novel ever produced in the late 1830s by Charles Dickens. And it was a book which he was made to order. In other words, the publisher said, "Hey, how about this? We got these series of comic
Cockney sporting plates.
Yeah,
I guess they're kind of like little sport cartoons or something.
Yeah, they're vignettes. Think of like those old timey political cartoons with the with the caricatured people that are meant to represent ideals in politics. But this is just like caricatures of people, like types of people. And an artist had produced a set of these plates, as in because they were published on carbon plates, and they then they asked Dickens to write the first serial novels, the first novel in installments, which he wrote a novel and they just published it in installments over a year or so. And
19 issues over 20 months.
20 months. Okay, almost 2 years. Wow. Okay. The point though being, Dickens wrote a whole story based upon a publisher request. From a bunch of illustrations. Like, here are some illustrations. Write a story about
from not from his heart. Yeah,
exactly.
Didn't come to him in a dream.
Yeah, exactly.
He's just a good writer. Yeah, totally.
So I like that that observation that if you're a free mind and a free soul, you should be able to write. You're a good writer. You should be able to write to order. Someone should ask you about something, and you should be able to. I'm not saying you don't do research. You do research and then write about it.
Right. Yeah, like Chesterton. The guy could write about anything.
And then he criticizes in the middle of this paragraph. He criticizes the titles of his book, "What is Wrong with the World," "What's Wrong with the World," and then this essay, "What is Right with the World." He says they're too simplistic, because the real answer to the question, and this is what's hilarious, is when I first started "What's Wrong with the World," having never read this essay, that was the first thing that popped in my head. I'm like, you're going to ask what's wrong with the world? The devil's wrong with the world. Sin is what's wrong with the world. What's right with the world? God. Okay. Yeah. So it was like a flash in my mind. So when he said this out loud, I jived with it immediately. I'm like, yep, exactly. That's like overly simplified. This is what's wrong, what's right with the world. And he makes a joke about how that definition will still be true millions of years from now when in the heat death of the sun. So
Right.
assuming we last that long.
And then wasn't there also, just to kind of piggyback real quick on that, as Chesterton lore, wasn't there like a letter where he answered a letter in the newspaper and someone asked him what's wrong with the world or something like that, and he answered, "I am."
Yes. Well, he says that at the end of his preface in What's Wrong with the World. He says, I, that's that, like he puts that in, I think.
Does he? Did I miss it?
Now, maybe I'm conflating things in my mind, but I think
Okay.
I think that's
Maybe
right.
You're right. Maybe it's in this, yeah.
He makes a joke about from, not in this essay, but in the What's Wrong with the World essay. And he says, well, what's wrong with the world is I am. I'm what's wrong with the world. But I think you're right. I think he does, in fact, do that in a letter as well. Makes the same joke. And the interesting thing at the end of this paragraph is talking about optimists and pessimists. And he says, people are obsessed with optimism and pessimism. This was the age, by the way, that they developed this work, was in Chesterton's lifetime. It was like this, the idea that people can be looking on the bright side or looking on the dark side of the world. And there was, his point is, why are they always looking at where the person's going with it? How about they just look at whether the person sees the work, what is, as something good or something not good, not what's gonna be, but what is or what has been as something good or not good, and that those people who don't believe, like in another world, those are the reckless ones, because the modern progressives, from his last sentence of this paragraph, they're the people that criticize optimists and say that they're reckless about they're wrong about predicting good always coming, or pessimists the same way. And at this point he's jabbing at the modern progressives themselves and saying they're the ones that don't believe in another world, and so they're hoisted by their own petard, because imagining and working from a premise that there are other worlds, whether those worlds are supernatural, spiritual, or physical, is itself more reckless and more just sort of off base than anything that optimists or pessimists get up to. So
right. Anyway. And when he's saying other world, he means he's saying heaven or another realm. Is that what he's saying? Like,
I think so. Yeah.
Like this is, rather than this being the only thing that exists. Yeah. And so making the point that people that have rejected that try to put that utopia here on Earth, and that makes them reckless and otherworldly. Right. I'm putting it in my dumb understanding.
No, I think that's right. And it's not dumb at all. You're doubting yourself a lot, but
it took me all to process that last sentence. He does a little word trickery anyway. So this is a long one. This is a long one. Here we go. Long paragraph.
Now, for the matter of that, I do not think the world is getting much better in very many vital respects. In some of them, I think the fact could hardly be disputed. The one perfectly satisfactory element at the present crisis is that all the prophecies have failed. At least the people who have been clearly proved to be wrong are the people who were quite sure they were right. That is always a gratifying circumstance. Now, why is it that all these prophecies of the wise have been confounded? And why has the destiny of men taken so decisive and different a course? It is because of the very simple fact that the human race consists of many millions of two-legged and tolerably cheerful, reasonably unhappy beings who never read any books at all and certainly never hear of any scientific predictions. If they act in opposition to the scheme which science has foreseen for them, they must be excused. They sin in ignorance. They have no notion that they are avoiding what was really unavoidable. But indeed, the phrases loosely used of that obscure mass of mankind are a little misleading. To say of the bulk of human beings that they are uneducated is like saying of a Red Indian hunter that he has not yet taken his degree. He has taken many other things. And so, sincerely speaking, there are no uneducated men. They may escape the trivial examinations, but not the tremendous examinations of existence. The dependence of infancy, the enjoyment of animals, the love of woman, and the fear of death. These are more frightful and more fixed than all conceivable forms of the cultivation of the mind. It is idle to complain of schools and colleges being trivial. In no case will a college ever teach the important things. He has learnt them right or wrong, and he has learnt them all alone.
So the real learning is in real life.
Yes. And so he's doing a thing here where he's saying that I don't know what prophecies he's talking about, but
I looked up. I came up with a list of some of the prophecies they were making about the future in his time.
Oh, cool!
So I could quickly go down those real quick.
Go for it. Yeah.
In 1893, they had predicted that there was the end of wars. There would be no more wars.
Sure.
That we were done.
Yep.
Pre-World War I and II. Sadly, funny, but not funny. Population collapse in cities. In the 1800s, urban planners and social commentators like Frederick Law Olmsted warned that overcrowded cities would become unlivable due to diseases, poverty, and filth, leading to mass population declines. But cities like New York and London grew into thriving metropolises with improved sanitation infrastructure. Permanent class divisions were predicted in 1900. They thought that they were unlikely to change, with the working class permanently subordinate to elites. But the 20th century saw social mobility increase in many societies due to different labor movements, education reforms, etc. Decline of religion, they predicted in 1882. Friedrich Nietzsche declared God is dead. They were predicting God would fade as science and rationalism dominated. But there was revivals of faith numerous times since then.
Right.
Utopian socialism by 1900 in the 1870s. They were predicting that they would have utopian socialism would be instated. And then also in the 1890s, they predicted end of immigration to the U.S. Some American economists and politicians, including Francis Amasa Walker, argued that immigration would soon cease as Europe's economies improved and the U.S. reached its carrying capacity. Immigration continued at high rates, as we know. It's a very big thing. Anyway, it's kind of funny.
It's funny. Some of those seem directly tied to Thomas Malthus and his Malthusian belief that we're running out of food and production can't keep up with demand, and so we're going to have mass starvation.
Mm-hmm.
And all the things too. That would affect immigration. That would affect all kinds of things. It's interesting. This is definitely the age of the beginning of scientific predictions. So, before the 1800s, there were very few. Like there are some in the 1700s, but when you're in the height of the Enlightenment, but really, it's the beginning of scientific predictions. Everyone wants to have scientists predict what's going to happen of all sorts, and it's part of man's desire to know the future. Always kind of a universal thing, and he's pointing out, hey, they're all wrong, and that's kind of satisfying. And he's going to talk more about these people that make these sorts of predictions. He's going to have a peculiarly funny name for them in the next couple paragraphs or a few paragraphs down. But in this paragraph, he's giving a kind of a full-throated defense of why they were wrong, why science is wrong. And of course, being Chesterton, he's having a laugh because he's not really giving us the reason why they were wrong. He's just sort of hinting at it. So he says, the reason they're wrong is because, the human race consists of all these millions and now billions of people, and they're cheerful, tolerably cheerful, reasonably unhappy beings who don't read books and don't certainly never heard of any scientific predictions, and they act. It's not their fault. They're ignorant, and they were quote unquote supposed to act a certain way, but no one told them that, and so they acted a different way. So, which is of course the funny part is, if that's what scientists are predicting, the reason isn't because of the ignorance of human beings. The reason is because the scientists don't know the real principles by which human beings act. And so then he goes on, though, to defend the uneducated quality, the fact that in his time, which was absolutely true, almost none of humanity, percentage-wise, had a life of reading books. That was a thing which only existed in the 20th century and only in certain countries. And so in the 19th century, handful of countries. So he defends them, and he defends them by saying, hey, look, they may not have gone to college, but but they know the more important things in life that they learn from experience. I particularly have to admit I like his very funny and violent joke. I don't know if you caught it, about the Red Indian hunter. To say the bulk of human beings that they are uneducated is like saying of a Red Indian hunter that he has not taken his degree. He has taken many other things. So he's talking about the joke is about scalps.
Oh.
That's what, the taking of scalps was a pretty common term as a translation from various Indian Native American tongues. So,
yeah.
But then he goes on to explain that it's these important things in life that they know. So they have some primary truth that the trivial education that you get doesn't touch on and never will.
We'll keep it going here.
Yep.
We therefore come back to the primary truth that what is right with the world has nothing to do with future changes, but is rooted in original realities. If groups or people show an unexpected independence or creative power, if they do things no one had dreamed of their doing, if they prove more ferocious or more self-sacrificing than the wisdom of the world had ever given them credit for, then such inexplicable outbursts can always be referred back to some elementary and absolute doctrine about the nature of men. No traditions in this world are so ancient as the traditions that lead to modern upheaval and innovation. Nothing nowadays is so conservative as a revolution. The men who call themselves Republicans are men walking the streets of deserted and tiny city-states and digging up the great bones of pagans. And when we ask on what republicanism really rests, we come back to that great indemonstrable dogma of the native dignity of man. And when we come back to the Lord of creation, we come back of necessity to creation. And we ask ourselves that ultimate question which St. Thomas Aquinas, an extreme optimist, answered in the affirmative. Are these things ultimately of value at all?
I know we did have a question from Lisa Tomlinson from our Patreon.
Okay.
About which I figured you probably would answer anyway, because I was going to ask too. What does Republican mean then compared to now? In England.
Right. So it's a political philosophy more than a party. It's not a party. It's a political philosophy that harkens to the idea that men can form their own government. They don't need the divine right of kings. They don't need theocrats to speak for God to have a government. But the government can be made from a republic. I mean, it comes originally from Plato's work called The Republic, wherein it's a rational exercise of if we were to build a state, we were to build a country from scratch, how would we constitute that country? What kind of laws, what kind of things would the people be engaged in? How would they interact with each other? What kind of culture would it have? And so the Republic by Plato is the original source of the word Republican. But of course, that's through the through the post Middle Ages, Enlightenment, Renaissance, and Enlightenment, and humanism, rise of humanism, and the variances that took place, where then they began borrowing from Christianity the ideas of things like the one that he says is the core of republicanism, which is why do you say that men can build a state of their own? Why do they deserve? Why isn't it the strong that should build the state, that rule by the fittest or strongest? Why isn't it the rule by those the gods appointed? Why is this form of government worthy of existing? Because we are all created we have this native dignity of man, which comes from God. Which is why the very next sentence after the native dignity of man, he says, when we come back to the Lord of creation, in other words, the native dignity of man begs the question, how do we have a right to form a state as Republican form of government? Because we all have the same dignity. So a Republican state is one based on the idea that all human beings, to take a phrase from our founding of our nation, that men are by their nature endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. And in other words, we have a dignity to ourselves that everyone has in society. And then when you ask about that creator, the Lord of creation in Chesterton's sentence, we come back to the necessity of creation itself, in other words, of the thing that he made. And we asked ourselves the question, which is, do these have any value at all? And in key Chesterton, funnily enough, he's already enamored with Thomas Aquinas, and he's not a Catholic at this point. He's 1910. So
I wasn't sure if that was an insult that he's an extreme optimist, because I don't know if Chesterton likes optimists.
Yeah, well, he's an optimist in this regard. Remember, Chesterton is poking the bear on optimists, and he's saying people criticize optimism, and they say it's all about the future, which what it should be about is reality in the present and the past. And in that sense, Aquinas is an absolute optimist. He says that things are of value, and they're of value because God made them, and what he made was good. And so he saw that what he made was good. And so they have value by his creation. And that's a kind of native optimism that Chesterton doesn't insult as much. He's saying, in fact, that's the more true kind of optimism. He does have quite a few quips about the people that are optimists blindly about the future. But I think we see in this essay a distinction that he's, without being academic about it, there is a distinction between optimists, two kinds. I think we're seeing him sort of intimate that there are different. We ought to be optimistic about what is. We ought to see that it is good and expect it to be good. About the future, not so much, but about what is, yes.
Yeah, he really dives into the meat of the essay here, I think. Let's get into this next paragraph, which I've broken up.
And are we?
What is right with the world is the world.
Oh, no. Sorry to break it up. So are we finishing on this paragraph?
No. Wait. No. In the next paragraph.
Okay.
What is right with the world is the world. In fact, nearly everything else is wrong with it. This is that great truth in the tremendous tale of creation, a truth that our people must remember or perish. It is at the beginning that things are good, and not, as the more pallid progressives say, only at the end. The primordial things, existence, energy, fruition, are good so far as they go. You cannot have evil life, though you can have notorious evil livers. Manhood and womanhood are good things, though men and women are often perfectly pestilent. You can use poppies to drug people, or birch trees to beat them, stone to make an idol, or corn to make a corner. But it remains true that in the abstract, before you have done anything, each of these four things is in strict truth a glory, a beneficent speciality and variety. We do praise the Lord that there are birch trees growing amongst the rocks, and poppies amongst the corn. We do praise the Lord even if we do not believe in him. We do admire and applaud the project of a world, just as if we had been called to counsel in the primal darkness and seen the first starry plan of the skies. We are, as a matter of fact, far more certain that this life of ours is a magnificent and amazing enterprise than we are that it will succeed.
Such a great it's one of those things that he says it's so simple and such a reminder of something so obvious, because we just get so lost in the future and what's going to come, and we've grown up with evolution and just all these thoughts about progress and all these progressivism and who's going to do what, but just think so easy to lose sight of just how good the world actually is without our hands on it.
That's right. It's great. I love it because this is classic Chesterton. He's going back to the wonder about the world, looking at normal things with new eyes, so that you see how they're a blessing, you see how they're beautiful, and they're they're a glory, a beneficent speciality and variety. It's beautiful language.
The utopia was at the beginning, like in the Bible, not at the end.
Right, and exactly right. So, like Genesis, I have to say, because that's the kind of nerd I am, that I was struck by this, because this is written in 1910, published in 1910, written in before that. And I can't help but think there's something in this paragraph that just echoes the beginning work that Tolkien wrote in the Silmarillion, because his view in the Silmarillion and then echoed in Lord of the Rings is that what was made first is good, worthwhile, and then as time goes on, it gets worse. And everything that comes after is not getting better, it's getting worse most of the time. Sometimes you can have revivals, but the general progress of things is not to the better, but it tends to be towards corruption. And Chesterton has this line: "We do admire and applaud the project of a world," so the making of a world, "just as if we had been called to counsel in the primal darkness and seen the first starry plan of the skies." In Tolkien's Silmarillion, the elves are awakened. They're awakened, and they see the stars for the first time. They're called to council. They broke together, and they see the light. And there's no sun and moon at this time in Tolkien's world. There's just the stars, and they admire and applaud it. Like that line that he has there seems like it's like Tolkien took it as a direct inspiration for something that happened to Silmarillion. Maybe it's not true, but that's at least what echoes in my mind when you see that these simple things that we take for granted. I was recently out in the mountains with my family, and man, it is like the stars. For someone that lives in LA, when you get out to a place where there's true darkness at night, and you just see the glory of the stars, it's just unbelievable. And
it's amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, I think he's right.
We were in Flagstaff on our me and my kids road tripped across the U.S. to Tennessee and back. And one of our stops was at a little hut in Flagstaff.
Nice.
And when we looked up at the sky, my kids were just blown away. I mean, I was blown away too, but they'd never seen it. I don't think they just couldn't believe with their eyes. They didn't know that many stars were in the sky.
Yeah.
What about quickly on the pun? Corn to make a corner.
He's
like a corner? Like a corner?
Yeah, he just means the word corner.
Because on the list, it's all like violent things, like poppies to drug people, birch trees to beat them, stones to make an idol, or corn to make a corner.
Well, he's saying you can use a thing to do something that it's got nothing to do with.
I think it's like inherently good thing to do a bad thing.
Yeah. So corn to make a corner, I can't help but just see it philologically, like from the word corn, and you make the word fun. You make the word corner. And corner, so which has nothing to do with. But you're right, and a corner is something that's sharp, so it can be used for violence. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there, but I do like his bringing up the analogy. Like, here are some beautiful things, and we can use them to do bad things all the time.
You get sent to the corner because you've been bad. I don't know. All right, we'll finish the paragraph here.
These evolutionary optimists who called themselves meliorists, a patient and poor-spirited lot they are, always talk as if we were certain of the end, though not of the beginning. In other words, they don't know what life is aiming at, but they're quite sure it will get there. Why anybody who has avowedly forgotten where he came from should be quite so certain of where he's going to, I have never been able to make out. But meliorists are like that. They're ready to talk of existence itself as the product of purely evil forces. They never mention animals except as perpetually tearing each other to pieces. But a month in the country would cure that. They have a real giddy horror of stars and seas, as a man has on the edge of a hopelessly high precipice. They sometimes instinctively shrink from clay fungoids and the fresh young of animals with a quivering gesture that reveals the fundamental pessimist. Life itself, crude, uncultivated life, is horrible to them. They belong very largely to the same social class and creed as the lady who objected that the milk came to her from a dirty cow and not from a nice clean shop. But they are sure how everything will end.
All right, meliorism, the belief that the human condition can be improved through concerted effort and that there is an inherent tendency toward progress or improvement in the human condition. There you go.
Yeah.
Now, how does that tie into all the animal stuff? That was confusing.
So what Chesterton's pointing out here is that meliorist, which first time I ever heard or saw that word or that term, made me laugh because it comes from Latin melior, and Latin means better. So the reason it was coined that way is because they wanted people to know that you can make things better through human effort. But what's funny about naming yourself a meliorist is it sounds like you're saying I'm better than everyone else. So I'm a meliorist. So I found that fairly humorous. But what Chesterton's pointing out is because these are the people that believe that progress, human effort, makes things better. That's how you get good progress. Chesterton's pointing out that the people that actually hold this, like if you go and find a meliorist, it sounds good in theory, but when you find one, they sound like, and I mean, I admit I'd never met anybody. This movement died. Excuse me, movement died a long time ago, but although it kind of incorporated itself into modern thought.
I mean, I feel like progressive is the same in a way. I'm pro moving towards good stuff is what progressive means.
Yeah,
right?
but they need it.
Got a condescension.
They need it as you need human effort to do that. So
right.
So that's as opposed to like Hegel and Kant and Hume, not Hume so much. Hegel, Kant, and Marx and stuff, who thought that it was kind of inevitable that progress would lead to this betterment of society. We had to take action. We could speed it along, but it's inevitable. The meliorists were more practical. They were like, no, we have to do things. So it sounds like a good theory. What Chesterton's pointing out is that the people that actually hold this theory don't want to touch the real world. They just want they're very high society. They're very they in the modern phrase they need to go out and touch grass more because they don't like the real things. They like the idea of having clean milk, but they would prefer that it just came from a clean shop, not a dirty cow. Which is, of course, I recently took my kids to a dairy in Central California, and man, our cow is dirty.
Yeah,
especially in groups.
It's the weirdest thing. I just trying to think about it.
So
milk and eggs are so gross.
And yet they're awesome
they're the greatest food ever made.
From food perspective. So Chesterton's pointing out that they won't get themselves dirty. They won't. They live in the abstract, not in the real. And the real they find they sort of look at with a kind of horror. So they don't have that that admiration and applause for the project of a world that he had from his previous paragraph. And when they look up at the sky and see the stars, they have a kind of horror about it. They don't want to go outside. They want to talk about, electrical light and filling the world with the works of man instead of the good things of God. And so he doesn't have much good to say about them. And probably because he, unlike us, he actually knew meliorists in real life. So in a way, it's kind of funny because it's kind of a forgotten sect of progressivism.
Yeah. That's funny.
That's right.
This is the final paragraph of this episode. So here we go.
I am in precisely the opposite position. I am much more sure that everything is good at the beginning than I am that everything will be good at the end. That all this frame of things, this flesh, these stones are good things, but that I am more brutally certain than I can say. But as for what will happen to them, that is to take a step into dogma and prophecy. I speak here, of course, solely of my personal feelings, not even of my reasoned creed. But on my instincts alone, I should have no notion what would ultimately happen to this material world I think so magnificent. For all I know, it may be literally and not figuratively true that the tares are tied into bundles for burning, and that as the tree falleth, so shall it lie. I am an agnostic, like most people with a positive theology, but I do affirm with the full weight of sincerity that trees and flowers are good at the beginning, whatever happens to them at the end. That human lives were good at the beginning, whatever happens to them in the end. The ordinary modern progressive position is that this is a bad universe, but will certainly get better. I say it is certainly a good universe, even if it gets worse. I say that these trees and flowers, stars and sexes are primarily, not merely ultimately, good. In the beginning, the power beyond words created heaven and earth. In the beginning, he looked on them and saw that they were good.
Indeed. How can you argue with that?
Yeah. It's just emphasis. This is an emphasis paragraph saying that everything is good in the beginning. It may all come to a bad end. That's the phrase about the tares, which are weeds that look like wheat. Being bundled and burned, that may happen. Everything may come to a bad end in the end. tree that falls may just lie there. In other words, it won't grow into a new tree. Its seed will fail. But he doesn't know one way or another. What he knows is life is good now, and it was better in the beginning, and that they're not that you don't have to take a tree and apply evolution for it to be a good thing. You don't have to take a human and evolve us into something higher for us to be good. We are, in fact, in our existence, good. And so and that was attested to in the beginning. So
yeah. And it's so bizarre to be like, because evolution doesn't really have an end. If you believe in evolution, right? It just goes on and on and on, right?
Yeah. Strictly speaking, yes. People.
I guess it does supposed to be. It improves, right? It improves.
Yeah, but people get squirrely about that because it actually, the evidence is that that evolution appears to have an end. So there are creatures like the lobster, much ballyhooed lobster from the last 10 years, which have been evolutionarily the same for millions and tens and hundreds of millions of years. So apparently it evolved to its form and then it stopped. So there is actually an end, but evolutionists have no way of saying what that is or how. So who knows whether it's an end, you're at your end state, or whether you're in the progress of that. That's a little bit beyond their pay grade to answer those questions. They get squirrely about that. But their theory doesn't tell you if something is an evolutionary end at its end or needs to keep going. But philosophically speaking, you're right. Philosophically speaking, everything should just keep improving, right? That's the whole point, is everything is always getting better, or if you're a meliorist, everything is always getting better with our effort. If we do something about it. And so yeah, it's a little
but really, everything's always getting better at killing other things to survive, right? That's kind of what really,
which is why it's a primarily bad world, that he says. Yeah. That in their view.
Right.
The man who was Thursday St. Augustine the Ox, the Napoleon of Notting Hill.
Sorry, that was supposed to be more subtle.
These are the books that Chesterton wrote. He wrote enough essays to sink a boat.
That's halfway through this beefy essay. A lot going on here.
Yep.
But so we got part 2 next time. Don't forget to join us on Patreon. I sent this out early so people get to send us questions and go through the book with us. You get things early when we're able to. Like, we do these big multi-part episodes. Well, Patreon people get them often they get them all at once. They're really close together, a lot more close together.
Chesterton's Gateway is produced by Ethan Nicolle and Michael Grumbine. It is based on the book of the same name, which can be found on that capitalist monstrosity Amazon.com. Send questions and comments to chestertonsgateway@gmail.com. And join us on Patreon, where only the true Chestertonians can be found. Goodbye.
Bye. And all these songs can be found on Spotify, Apple Music. It's going to repeat. And it's called Chesterton's Gateway. Look up the band. Look at Chesterton's Gateway as a band. You get all these songs on there.
We love our songs.
We do love our songs. It's a fun character of the show.
And he debated other people like George Bernard Shaw as well. These are the books that Chesterton wrote. He wrote enough essays to sink a boat, and a whole bunch of poems we've never read. We just read the everlasting man again. These are the books that Chesterton wrote. He wrote enough essays to sink a boat, and a whole bunch of poems we've never read. We just read the everlasting man again.